CSV, or comma-separated values files, are very common for data analysis. You'll often want to import them. Fortunately, the Pandas package makes it straightforward to import data in this format. The tricky part is that there's no standard format for CSV files, which means you'll need to play around with a lot of the options. We'll cover the most common ones here. Throughout this video, we'll repeatedly import a dataset about the most popular media franchises. First, we import the Pandas package with the conventional alias, PD. Let's read a CSV file that's standard enough that we can use default options. I'll use the file browser to open it. Notice that the top line contains the names of the columns. This is called the header row. Other lines contain one observation, in this case a media franchise. Notice that each value is separated by a comma, hence the name comma-separated values. Also notice that string columns are quoted. This is common, but doesn't always happen. Back to the code. To read a CSV file, call PD, then a dot, then read_CSV. It's a function, so we need parentheses. To use the default arguments, we just need the file name, default.csv. One variation in CSV files is that there is no header row included. This is common when the data was exported from a database. Let's see the file in the file browser. The contents are the same as before, but the first line is missing. Back to the code. We need to specify the column names ourselves as a list of strings, stored here in the column_names variable. Again, we call pd.read_csv and pass the file path. This time, we also need the names argument. Sometimes CSV files use the tab character instead of commas to separate the values. The separator character is sometimes called the delimiter. Separating and delimiting mean the same thing. In the file browser, you can see gaps between the values. These are the tabs. Also notice that the strings haven't been quoted. This is common when you have tab-delimited files. In the code, as per usual, we call pd.read_csv and pass the file path. To specify tabs as separators, we use the sep argument and set it to \t in quotes. A similar variation to tab separators is European formatted CSV files. In countries where a comma is used as a decimal place, it's confusing to use a comma to separate values as well. Looking at the file, you can see commas used as decimal places, and semicolons are used to delimit the cells. Once again, we call pd.readcsv and pass the file path. As with the tab-delimited case, we call sep, this time giving it a semicolon. We also need to use the decimal argument, passing a comma. The data in a CSV file doesn't always start on the first row. In this variant of the file, the first few rows are taken up with a data dictionary, written in YAML format. Documenting your data is a great idea to assist the analyst, but we need to ignore it when reading in the data. By now you know the routine. Call pd.readcsv and pass the file path. The data starts on row 9, so we skip the first 8 rows by setting skip rows to 8. One more variation in CSV files is how missing values are dealt with. In the franchises dataset, some franchises are missing the value for the number of movies. Pandas has fairly sophisticated missing value detection, but if a non-standard value is used, you need to deal with it. In this variation, missing values are denoted with a question mark. We call pd.readcsv and pass the file path, then pass na_values set to a question mark. It's common to not need to use every column in a dataset. For large datasets, it's much faster to ignore the columns you don't need during import, rather than reading everything then taking a subset. As always, we call pd.readcsv and pass the file path. You can specify the columns you want to keep with useCols, set to the list variable cols to keep. Pandas usually does a good job of determining what the data types for each column should be. Sometimes you'll want to override the default choice. Inspecting the data types for each column, you'll notice that inception year is imported as an integer. That might be useful, but you might prefer that it is read as a datetime object. We call pd.readcsv and pass the file path, then use parseDates to request that columns are converted to datetime objects. This takes a list of column names. Here we just want inception year inside the list. Thank you for watching. I'm Richie, and if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with the latest data and AI content.